Thank you for tuning in today. As we approach the festive season, we are all starting to look homeward and think about, should we go home? And if we do, what is what are the complications it may bring? How do we return to Singapore after being in South Africa for the Christmas period? And as such, I thought, as the chamber, we've thought that it would be great to just get some point of views of some South Africans who have recently traveled to and from between South Africa and Singapore. So today we're joined by Mark and Marike. So if I could please ask you guys, could you just briefly introduce yourselves? If I start with Mark.
Yeah, thank you, Michael, and good morning, afternoon to everybody. My name is Mark McGowan. I'm the VP of Operations for a company in Singapore called 𝗂𝗶𝗫 Asia. We supply business advisory service to international clients. And I have just recently returned to Johannesburg. When I say recently returned, at the beginning of November. So have had some first-hand experience of what it took to get back.
Thank you, Mark. Marike, you've also got quite a story to tell.
Yeah, hi guys, my name is Marike. I'm a housewife, and we were stuck in South Africa from March when all the borders closed. So we came back in the beginning of June, and since then we've been helping everybody with their questions and giving answers on how to travel between South Africa and Singapore.
And I think Marike has kind of undersold what she managed to do. Her and the president of the chamber at the time, Gavin, were instrumental in helping people find their way back during what was a more difficult time than we find ourselves in now. So thank you guys for making the time to speak to us with the chamber today. And to everyone watching, this is not immigration advice, it's just our opinions, and we really hope we can help you. So I think if we could start with you, Mark, could you tell us a little bit about your process of leaving Singapore, and did you conduct extensive research, or was it just on a whim you had to go home? Can you just explain your journey?
Yeah. So Michael, I think I was probably in a similar position to many other South Africans who had obviously not expected to be locked out of the country for a prolonged period of time. And I think when the situation arose and started evolving, I think we were all looking for whatever support we could get from the various groups that were there. And we were monitoring what the process would be. So I think, like many people, we considered whether it was worthwhile going the repatriation route. At the time, there were a couple of options available. Qatar Airways was one of them. KLM, I think, were the other ones. And it was a case of just watching that process, constantly watching the process, seeing it evolve, seeing whether it would be a good idea to leave then, but then there was the uncertainty of not knowing whether we would get back to Singapore. So I think from a personal point of view, I then took the decision to say, look, let's just stick this out. As hard as it is, let's just stick it out and wait for things to normalize. And that's essentially what I did. In terms of then making the decision to go, a lot of that revolved around the information that Marike and Gavin had actually provided on their support group that they created, which I'm sure we'll hear more about, because that really was the knowledge base that I think most South Africans that I've spoken to have actually used. Thanks to their efforts, their contacts with the various government departments, the various ministries, they were able to put together a step-by-step process of what you needed to do, what documents you required, what processes you need to follow. And the one thing that I will say to anybody who's looking to actually travel back to South Africa, if that's what you're doing and you need the advice, you do need to get in touch with the group, get onto that WhatsApp group, because you will find everything you need in that knowledge base that they have so painstakingly created. And personally, I cannot thank Marike and Gavin enough for what they did, because it really just then made the process so easy and so streamlined.
Well, great to hear. And again, I think, Marike, you can tell us a bit more about that when I get to you shortly. But Mark, my next question for you is essentially, when you exited Singapore at the time, was there, what was the experience of going to Changi Airport and getting through the exit? And on your flight, did you have to wear PPE and a mask the entire time? Was the flight empty? What was that experience like?
Yeah, so Michael, I suppose we should probably take one step back, which is just to, what process do you need to go through in order to get to Changi Airport? And, in order to do that, at the time that I left, and I'm not sure if the situation is still the same now, but at the time, it was necessary to apply via the MOH, the Ministry of Health, to obtain permission to get the COVID test, to get the PCR test. And that was an online process that you had to go through. You essentially log on to the website, you put in all your personal details, and you needed to give reasons as to why you needed to leave the country. You had to substantiate your reason for wanting to leave Singapore, and they would then review your application. If your application was successful, they would then send you an email to say you have been approved to actually get the test done. With that approval, you were then able to go to a number of the travel clinics and medical facilities that were offering the tests. Here again, Marike had prepared a great list of options that were available with the contact details on it. I elected to use the Raffles Medical Center at Changi Airport. Again, you go online. You then select a time that's available from a list of times that they have on their booking system, and you arrive there with all the documentation that's required, including the very important document, which was that letter from the Ministry of Health, because without that, they would not give you the test. And that process took, from the time of arriving at the clinic to get the test done to the time of paying and walking out, that took about 15 minutes.
Oh, wow.
It was a super efficient process. It may have had something to do with the fact that I went at 4:45 a.m. on a Sunday morning, but it was certainly worth it. And then it was a case of waiting for the test results. As I say, I went at 4:45 a.m. in the morning, and I received the test results via email at about the same afternoon.
Oh, wow.
And I think it was when that piece of paper came through that I realized that I am actually heading back to South Africa now, because up until that point in time, there was still a bit of uncertainty as to whether or not it was really going to happen. And then it was a case of getting ready. Heading to the airport, Changi Airport, for those of us that have traveled through it, many times before, it's just very different. It is just not that hive of activity. It's extremely quiet. Very, very different to what we're used to. But again, a very painless process. I flew on SQ direct, got to the SQ counter. The only difference now is they have shields at the counters, which they never had before. And the people at the counter just checked your documentation. The one thing that they did check was obviously that you had your negative test, because that was required when you get up to the other side. And once that was done, it was a case of booking your baggage through and heading towards immigration. And once we got to immigration, which was obviously very quiet, it was a case of getting through onto the other side. And that's when you realize what a difference there is in the travel space right now. Shops were closed. There were a few places open where you could, get a cup of coffee, get something to eat, but it's just very, very different to the experience that we're all used to. I accessed the lounge at Changi, and In the lounge, again, a very different thing. There are no more buffets, obviously. If you want something to eat, you place an order, and then you go and collect it. And again, very empty. You know, what is normally somewhere that is so bustling and alive and so full. You know, the sort of Asia and Singapore that we know. Well, yeah, it's a little bit quiet for now. And then getting onto the plane, it was a standard process for clearing security, as it always was. Getting onto the plane was just the norm. But you do have to wear a mask all the time. So you're obliged to keep your mask on for the full flight, unless you're actually eating. Not much difference on the flight other than the fact that the cabin crew is not moving around as much as what they used to. So, you know, the previous service that you would get where they would walk through the flight, you know, serving refreshments all during the flight, that doesn't happen anymore. They basically serve a meal when you get on the plane. They serve a breakfast before you're about to land. And I think if you want anything else in between, you need to go and actually get it. But other than that, it was very uneventful.
And in terms of the capacity of the flight, I mean, were you the lone ranger on the aeroplane, or was there anyone else with you?
I felt a bit like the Lone Ranger. It's difficult to say how many people were on the flight, but I would probably guesstimate it at maybe 30 to 40 passengers max.
Wow.
So, you know, you can imagine it was all very spread out. You know, people that were flying on alone, most people had, you know, more than one seat available to them. It was very spread out. I guess that will probably pick up now over the December period with more people wanting to return. But yeah, definitely a very different flying experience from that perspective to the norm. Yeah.
Absolutely. And upon arriving in South Africa, and you made your way through the gates and reached the desks of immigration, did you have to re-present your negative test results? Talk us through that a bit.
Okay, so as far as that goes, what they did when we got to South Africa was they staggered us exiting the plane. So they moved through the cabin and people to exit the plane on a more sort of structured basis. They asked everybody to remain seated until they were given instruction to leave. When you exited the plane, the health authorities were at the door and they checked your COVID test there. So they would check to see that you had your COVID test. They would match the details from your COVID test to the passport, and then let you move through to immigration. They also handed out a health declaration form, which you needed to complete and hand in at the immigration desk. So the one piece of advice I'd give to everybody, make sure you've got a pen on you. Because you're going to need that between the time you exit the plane and the time you get down to immigration. And maybe practice standing up and writing, because there's nowhere for you to lean down and fill it in. So, you know, but other than that, it was, there were very few counters open, very few immigration counters open, and simply because there's just not the volume coming through. You know, when I looked out of the window walking up to the escalators to get down to the immigration hall, there was one aircraft sitting out on the tarmac. It was a 𝘂𝗪 aeroplane, and that was the only thing. I think there were more pigeons in the airport than there actually were aircraft. So again, very, very different OR Tambo to what we're all used to.
Absolutely. So, I mean, you filled out the form, you showed them your negative tests, you presented your passport for stamping, walked through security, collect your bags, and you were free to go?
Yeah, so then you're free to get out. I think there's a few changes when you get out. There is one designated area for pickup, Uber pickup or a taxi pickup, And that's actually across the road from the terminal building in the parkade.
Okay.
It's signposted when you get out. So when you walk out of the immigration terminal, you essentially move to the escalators that are on the left. You go up a level, cross over the weighbridge, and it's signposted there to actually tell you where to go. So people aren't allowed into the terminal building, or they weren't at that stage anyway. I don't think it's changed. You aren't allowed into the terminal building to wait for passengers. You've effectively got a designated area, and that's where you get picked up from. So, you know, that was the one sort of logistical difference that was there. But it was demarcated, so it was easy enough to actually follow.
I mean, this all really just sounds like the new frontier, and I really hope it's not here to stay, and hopefully we'll be back to the hustle and bustle that we enjoy in international travel. Well, Mark, thanks for those insights. And Marike, I think now shifting into, okay, we've heard of how do we get to South Africa, but I mean, upon exiting and coming back to Singapore, could you briefly touch on, you know, the processes from your point of view from South Africa to Singapore? You know, who do you speak to? How do you apply, and that sort of thing?
I just want to add on to what Mark said. There was a few changes literally the last week, traveling from Singapore to South Africa, which you didn't experience. So you don't have to apply to MOH anymore to get your COVID test. So that at least this was, but the rest is you still need to go for your COVID, your negative test. That's still the same. You don't need the application anymore. And as for the arrival and departure pickup points at 𝗂𝗶𝗸𝗃, it's either in the process of changing or it's already changed, where people are allowed to do it at the old drop-off and pickup points. There was an article last week, so just check upon arrival or departure that you can actually get dropped off at the old designated areas.
Great. Well, thank you for adding that on. And as you can tell, Marike's got her fingers to the pulse on this whole situation. I think before we actually even get into the whole process of returning, then, do you want to just touch on the WhatsApp group and you know how you guys share information just generally, and how easy it is for people to plug in?
Yeah, so you can either contact the Chamber of Commerce, then Gavin will, or one of you guys will share the link, or you can contact 𝗪𝗂𝗃 on Facebook, and then we will share the link with you. It's quite easy. It's very informal. As I get new information, it's posted on the group. If someone else gets information, they will post it on the group. So it's just a discussion of helping each other out, getting back and forth.
Okay, great. That's very good to know. So in terms of then the process of returning to Singapore and the different ministries that you'll have to reach out to, Ministry of Health possibly, or Ministry of Manpower only?
That has also changed a lot. So when we came back earlier, so the changes is way back when there were so many people trying to get into Singapore, and with all the borders being closed, there was only repatriation flights, and everybody wanted to come into Singapore at once. So the capped limit for the day's approvals was so limited that we couldn't get approval to get in. So we had to reach out to the different departments. Luckily, we reached out to the Ministry of Trade and Industry, and then they helped us all return on repatriation flights. Luckily, these days, it's so much easier to come back. It's back to normal commercial flights. You don't need to wait weeks for a flight. There's actually regular flights coming in. You don't really need assistance with the foreign departments. It's literally, if you're an EP, you apply your, you can go through MOM, and that's about it. And it's not even, it's the standard process. There's no more escalating to other departments. So that helped a lot. If there's still a glitch, I'm sure we can still approach the different departments, but we haven't used them in months. It's just a lot easier.
Okay. I think that's very good to hear, because a lot of people are so stressed of, if I go to South Africa, can I actually leave and come back to Singapore?
Yeah. I get a lot of people asking me, do I need to inform someone in Singapore that I'm leaving? No, you don't. You are still a South African citizen. You don't have to inform anybody. You can just, as long as you've got your ducks in a row for South Africa and you've got your PCR negative test, then you can go. You don't have to inform any of the departments. If the big thing is to get approval to come back. That is where you involve the Singaporean authorities again. I just want to caution everybody, I'm saying that everything is easier these days. We are not sure what's going to happen with the festive season traveling. There might be a lot of people coming in and then the daily quotas might be reached sooner. So don't leave it until number 99. You can actually apply 30 days prior to your arrival date back in Singapore. Don't wait, the quota might be reached for your date of return.
Okay. And in terms of how people then reach out to the ministry to ask to seek the permission to return, it's very standardized. You just go to a website, fill out a form, submit a date of return, and click send, and you wait a few days, or?
So there's different channels to follow. If you're a PR, you don't have to apply to return to Singapore. You're entitled to come back whenever you want to. You will, however, still be subject to the 14-day quarantine in the designated facilities, which we all know are hotels, and for your swab test during the stay. You're not obligated to do the pre-departure test in South Africa, but just check with your airline, because I know Emirates Airline specifically requires you to do a COVID test before you get on their flights. So in either way, you'll have to do the test, whether it's required for the airline or whether it's required for Singapore. It's standard. So if you're then on a long-term pass in Singapore, the EP holder needs to ask his HR department to apply for your return. They in return will contact MOM and fill in all the relevant documentation that they need to get. Then you're also still subject to the negative test 72 hours prior from your departure from South Africa, the 14 days quarantine, and then your swab test on day 11 at quarantine. Short-term visit passes at the moment is very scarce. They don't really grant it at the moment. So any visitors, it's done by a case-to-case basis, literally. You'll have to apply at ICA and then just plead your case for why you want to get someone on a visit pass over. And it's really just extreme cases where they will grant it, like a funeral, or there was at one stage there was a lady who said that she's giving birth to a newborn. She doesn't have any support system, no helper, and she miraculously got approval for a short-term visit pass. It's literally case-by-case basis. It's not like the old days where we can just fly our parents or brothers or sisters over. It doesn't work like that, just for a holiday.
Well, I think the fact that the quota system is not under pressure so much is probably the main change at the moment. But as you say, as festive season comes in and it becomes more busy, obviously people, as you say, they should not leave it until the last minute. So I think now that we've covered the application process, if we then look at going into the quarantine here in Singapore, it is compulsory for people returning from South Africa to do quarantine. We are not able to serve our quarantine or stay at home notice in our actual home. It's at a designated facility. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. So the only people that are allowed to serve their quarantine at their homes are people on the Green Lane Agreement. And unfortunately, South Africa is a long way from that Green Lane Agreement. So upon arrival at the airport, you'll go straight to immigration. They will, you don't get to choose your facility, because it's also the nice thing about this, because there's not a lot of people coming in, they allocate you to the nice hotels first. So way back when we came in, it was horrible hotels. So don't worry too much. The hotels these days are decent. Yeah, you get transported from the airport to your facility, and there you stay for your 14 days.
And I mean, as you say, the quality of the hotel can vary. Do you have any choice in the amount of money that you want to pay, or is it completely standardized and capped?
Stock standard and capped. You will be charged $2,000 per person, and just allocated to a hotel. Luckily, they will fill up the better hotels first. If you're sharing a room, it is $1,300 per person sharing. And then you will still need to do your swab test on day 11, which will be roughly around $200 per person.
Okay. In terms of, I suppose there's a few people that are traveling with families, and maybe they have a few little ones. And are you able to put in a request to say, look, we're a 5-person family, we can't actually be confined to one small hotel room. Can we have adjoining rooms?
So upon arrival at your hotel, you can request it on check-in. If they don't have available rooms, you might have to spend 1 or 2 nights crammed in a little room. Usually they're very accommodating if they've got the adjoining rooms available. But there's an option where you can phone your SHN helpline and then just plead your case there. And then if there's space, they will move you to a bigger hotel or adjoining rooms. So there is options. You won't be kind of stuck to that small little room for 14 days.
I think a lot of people will be pleased to hear that. One of my friends has recently returned to South Africa, and he said his biggest concern is when he comes back, him, his wife, and his 3 little boys will all be stuck in one room. And he just said, how am I supposed to do any work? So. Yeah.
Now you can, upon your entry, you can request for adjoining rooms.
Oh, well, that's great, and I feel that we've now kind of encompassed the whole Mark's process of leaving Singapore and returning to South Africa, leaving South Africa, returning to Singapore. Marike, do you have anything further you'd like to add that you think people could benefit from?
Yeah, I just want to, once you're in SHN, you will be on day 2 or 3, you will be asked to download an app. Then you will just have to just bring your own thermometer with, and they don't give it out at all the hotels, but you have to physically submit your temperature 3 times a day, your symptoms on the app. The app also needs to be open. That's the way they trace you and see that you don't leave your hotel room unaccompanied. They will also phone you via WhatsApp, or it's usually MOM that phones you and checking in on you. Sometimes it's a video call. You'll have to walk around the room and show them I am physically in my room. So there's no way you're going to be able to leave that hotel room apart from your negative to go and get your test. Some of the hotel rooms, the balconies and the windows doesn't even open. So you're really going to be stuck there for 14 days. Pack a lot of games in if you've got kiddies. But apart from that, you can also order in deliveries or order from Amazon if you need something urgently. Hotels are very accommodating in delivering the items to you. Then there's also your quarantine won't end on day 14. It will end on day 15 at 12 p.m. that afternoon.
Right. So it's actually more than you expect.
Yes, yeah.
And then in terms of the food, you said you can order in, but within that $2,000, do they include meals for yourself and your family?
They do include your meals. It's just you can choose from an international menu, a halal menu, I think, and then a vegetarian one. But sometimes the food it's being outsourced. It's not from the hotel directly. So it is mixed up where, for example, I have a 2-year-old in quarantine with me. They brought me spicy noodles for her to eat, which is impossible, and you can't change it. So then you just order from Grab or wherever from, and they will just deliver for you. So yeah, they do give you food. It might not be your taste, and then you can order. At least you can order in.
It really sounds like we're just in a very nice prison, I would say. Great. Well, I think, Marike, we've covered all sorts on your side now. And Mark, do you have any closing remarks you'd like to add?
No, Michael, I think Marike has given us a really good overview of what the process is, and again, I would just like to thank her and Gavin for the work that they've done. It was absolutely invaluable, and strongly encourage anybody who's looking to get back who isn't yet on that group. Get on there. You will have all the information that you need, and it will certainly make your life easier.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Michael, if you don't mind, I just want to add, they've implemented a new process where you need to, if you don't arrive in Singapore on your approved date, and you don't let ICA know 3 days prior to your arrival, you will still be liable for your outstanding SHN cost, even though you didn't enter the country. So if something happens where you miss your flight or if anything that happens, you need to inform ICA 3 days prior to arrival to avoid paying that cost without actually being in the hotel.
Wow.
That's very important, yeah.
So you could end up paying it twice.
Yes.
Wow. Geez, so that's great information right there, Marike. So just following up and in conclusion for this conversation we've just had, to our listeners and to the audience, in the description box below you will find some useful links. There will be a link to the South African Chamber of Commerce website. If you'd like to just click on that and have a squiz at what we've got going on. We also have a section of useful documents for you there to review. Further to that, there will also be a link to the South Africans in Singapore Facebook group, where you guys can access and post questions and get involved with the community. And further to that, I'll also have the link to the WhatsApp group that Marike is the administrator of. And we really hope that this has been of benefit to you, and if you're able to get home to your family, enjoy your festive season. And you are alone during Christmas, during this difficult time here in Singapore, reach out to the chamber and perhaps we could introduce you to some other orphaned people for Christmas. Everyone, thank you very much for your time, Mark, Marike, and have a good afternoon, Marike, and a good morning to you, Mark.
Thanks for having us, Michael.
Mark, you're on mute.
And now I'm off.
Yes.
Thanks very much, Michael. Thanks, Marike. Have a good day.
All right,
You
everyone.
too.
Have a great one. Cheers now.
Thanks. Bye.